We often chase happiness through like external things, money, status,
Yeah.
possessions.
Right. We tell ourselves, oh, if I just get that promotion.
Exactly. Or if I buy that house, then I'll finally be happy, fulfilled. But it often just doesn't pan out that way, does it? It's like this treadmill feeling.
The famous hedonic treadmill, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. So the big question is, what if that feeling, that deep, true fulfillment, isn't actually something out there that comes to us?
What if it's something internal, something we can actively, systematically control, regardless of what's happening outside?
That's precisely it. That is the core insight we're really digging into today. It comes from decades of, well, fascinating research by the pioneering psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
On flow, right?
Yeah.
That term he coined, the psychology of optimal experience.
That's the one. And our mission here really is to give you a kind of shortcut to understanding this crucial but often elusive goal, how you can actually achieve, real control over the contents of your own consciousness.
That sounds powerful.
It is. It's about transforming ordinary life into something that feels intrinsically rewarding, an adventure almost.
Okay, that concept, control over consciousness.
Yeah.
It feels like the ultimate superpower. Yeah. Especially today. I mean, the world is so hyper-distracted.
Totally. Information overload, our attention constantly being pulled every which way.
Right. So we're going to unpack this concept of flow, really get into why it matters so much right now, especially when you see this, like, rising tide of discontent, even among people who are materially quite well off.
Mm-hmm. It's a paradox.
And most importantly, we want to provide you with a kind of blueprint, a step-by-step guide for cultivating what Csikszentmihalyi calls the autotelic self.
Yeah, that's the goal. Let's get into it. When we look at people in the developed world today, especially those who've achieved a certain level of material comfort, it's striking,
Yeah.
the paradox. Compared to, say, generations ago who were just struggling for basic survival, we are astronomically safer, more comfortable.
No question. Food, shelter, conveniences.
Exactly. Yet, study after study shows we're often no more content. So why does getting what we think we want often fail to actually make us happier?
And that failure, it seems rooted in what the research calls the treadmill of rising expectations. Is that right?
That's a key part of it. As soon as our basic biological needs, our material needs are met, reliable food, comfortable house, all the gadgets affluence kicks off this cycle.
A cycle of just wanting more.
Escalating desires, yeah. So contentment, the feeling we're chasing, instead of being achieved, it just keeps receding further and further away because our baseline expectations, they just keep shifting higher.
Ah, okay. So the new car feels great for a month, then it's just the car.
Exactly. That's hedonic adaptation in action. Your nervous system adapts incredibly quickly to the new stimulus, and poof, it's the new normal.
So to get that same thrill again, you need something bigger, better next time.
Precisely. And this means we're constantly sort of forfeiting our contentment now because we're so fixated on achieving some distant future goal. We stop deriving any real pleasure from the present struggle, the process itself.
So this widespread modern feeling, this sort of internal dissatisfaction, it's often not about external hardship, at least not for many in wealthier nations.
Right. The problem seems to be more structural, more internal. It's about how we process meaning, how we structure our own consciousness.
And historically, people had ways to deal with that.
Correct. Historically, people found a lot of spiritual sustenance, a sense of order, in what Csikszentmihalyi calls the shields of culture. Think complex systems like religions, philosophies, shared myths.
Things that gave a bigger picture.
Exactly. They provided this unifying sense of cosmic control, a kind of protection against the sheer chaos and uncertainty of the universe. But, well, as science and social changes have eroded some of those unified worldviews.
Those shields are wearing thin for a lot of people.
They are. And without that external, culturally provided structure for meaning, people naturally try to fill the void.
How?
Often with the most easily accessible rewards. Things like maximizing pleasures, the ones we're biologically programmed for, like certain foods or sex, or the ones society tells us are attractive, like chasing huge wealth or power.
Trying to grab onto something that feels like a direction.
Yeah, believing these external symbols will finally provide that missing piece. But these attempts, these sort of external fixes, they inevitably fail in the long run.
Why? Because they're just distractions.
They are. They're piecemeal solutions that distract from the real issue, which is the underlying state of consciousness itself. The source material is really adamant about this.
So things like diets or assertiveness training or just buying more stuff, They don't fix the core problem.
They don't work long-term because they're treating symptoms, not the cause. The fundamental quality of your life, it doesn't really depend on what other people think of you, or even on the exact stuff you own.
And there's data on this, right? That study by Ed Diener on the really wealthy Americans.
Yeah, the study on the Forbes 400 richest Americans, it's quite revealing. They reported being happy, on average, only about 77% of the time.
Okay. And how does that compare to, say, average folks?
Well, average working people in the same country reported being happy around 62% of the time.
So a 15 percentage point difference. That's surprisingly small.
It's negligible, really, when you consider the absolutely vast, almost unimaginable gap in resources, security, opportunities separating those two groups.
Wow.
It's a powerful argument that money alone, it just cannot guarantee happiness. The real insight here is how those resources, and maybe more importantly, how your attention is actually used. That's the key.
So you have to improve the quality of the experience directly, change how you live in the moment, not just chase external symbols.
Exactly. You have to structurally alter how you inhabit the present.
Okay, so if we can't just buy happiness or win it through status, we have to find it internally. And the path, you said, is achieving control over consciousness. So how does that actually work inside our heads?
Right. Well, consciousness itself, it's basically the outcome of our nervous system's architecture. Think of it as a finite information processing system.
Like a clearinghouse.
A clearinghouse, yeah, that's a good way to put it. For every sensation, feeling, thought, idea that we take in. And this clearinghouse function, that's what allows us to weigh all this incoming information and respond deliberately.
Instead of just reacting instinctively.
Exactly. We can choose our response. And the most crucial resource within that clearinghouse is our attention.
Attention. Okay.
Think of attention as our core psychic energy. And here's the catch. It's profoundly limited. We can only consciously process a certain amount of information at any given moment.
Like the old 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of info.
Something like that, yeah. And our intentions, which are shaped by our basic needs, our instincts, or maybe the social goals we've internalized, they act like these little magnetic fields.
Directing that limited energy.
Directing that psychic energy towards certain things and away from others. So the actual content, the texture, the perceived shape of our entire lives, it depends completely on how we choose to invest this limited attention, this psychic energy.
Okay, limited psychic energy. So what happens when it gets wasted or disorganized?
That's when you get inner disorder. Csikszentmihalyi calls this psychic entropy.
Entropy. Like chaos.
Pretty much. It happens when information comes into your consciousness, and instead of aligning with your goals, it actually disrupts your sense of self. It threatens the structure of your goals or your self-concept.
And when it happens?
A huge amount of that limited psychic energy has to be mobilized, diverted, just to deal with the threat, which leaves almost no attention free for anything positive like growth, enjoyment, or creative thinking.
And that feels like anxiety. Fear, worry, anger.
That's the physiological experience of it, yes. That feeling of lost energy, of being pulled apart. Think about rumination. You know, when a worry just goes round and round in your head.
Yeah, drains you completely.
That's a loop consuming your finite psychic energy. The classic example from the book is this guy Julio and his flat tire.
Okay, what happened?
Well, the external event, the tire going flat, that's just information, right? An inert physical fact, nothing inherently emotional about it.
But it's how Julio's consciousness processed that fact that matters.
Exactly. Julio's main goal at that moment was keeping his job. That job symbolized financial security, self-worth, everything. So the flat tire wasn't just a flat tire.
Is it interpreted as a threat?
A severe, unexpected threat to his core goal of keeping his job, which then threatened all his other life goals, paying rent, maintaining his self-respect, you name it.
And that interpretation triggered panic.
Yeah.
Psychic entropy in action.
Purest form. His attention wasn't focused efficiently on, say, changing the tire. It was completely consumed by catastrophic thinking, self-blame, maybe rage at the universe.
Right, wasting all that precious attention.
Totally. That panic consumed his limited attention, completely disorganized his ability to act collectively. Now, if Julio had, maybe, a broader sense of self, maybe he was also a great mechanic or had strong friends he could call,
the flat tire wouldn't have felt like such a catastrophic threat to his whole identity.
Precisely. The temporary setback wouldn't have threatened the core integrity of his self nearly as much, but because it challenged his central identity as a reliable worker, The resulting chaos, the entropy, severely impaired his ability to act rationally, even if just for, say, 20 minutes.
Okay, so psychic entropy is that inner disorder, the waste of attention. Then flow must be the exact opposite.
The ultimate opposite. Flow is when your consciousness is harmoniously ordered. All your psychic energy is invested in the action itself.
So it reinforces your sense of self instead of being lost to worries or self-doubt.
Exactly. It's efficiency made sublime. It feels effortless, even when the activity is hard.
And this state,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a new idea, is it?
Not at all. This state of inner freedom, this control, it's been a core human aspiration for millennia. Think about ancient practices: yoga, Taoism, Zen Buddhism.
They were all aiming for something similar.
They were all seeking ways to free consciousness from those deterministic influences, whether it's biological urges like hunger or social conditioning telling you what you should want. Their ultimate goal was identical to flow.
To achieve inner freedom.
Inner freedom, yes. Freeing your inner life from the constant threat of chaos and also from rigid automatic conditioning. It's about allowing you, the individual, to actually determine the content of your own experience.
Okay, so if the goal is this optimal experience, flow, we need to be really clear about something people often confuse: the difference between pleasure and enjoyment.
Ah, yes, crucial distinction. Pleasure is, well, it's passive, mostly.
Like contentment when your basic needs are met. Resting when you're tired, eating when you're hungry.
Exactly. It requires little to no real investment of attention. Pleasure is basically just a return to equilibrium, biologically or psychologically.
But enjoyment is different.
Very different. Enjoyment only happens as a result of an unusual investment of attention. It leads to an experience of novelty or discovery or achievement.
So it requires effort, concentration.
Effort, concentration, and engaging your skills in a way that stretches you just a little beyond your current capacity. For example, you take pleasure in just drinking a cold glass of water on a hot day. Simple satisfaction.
Right.
But you only truly enjoy, say, a complex wine tasting if you pay deep attention, focus your skills to discriminate the different notes, savor the nuances. That takes active engagement.
The key difference seems to be growth. Enjoyment pushes you forward, demands more skill, more complexity.
While pleasure just kind of reinforces the status quo, it keeps things stable.
And that leads to this really important term, autotelic activities.
Yes. Auto meaning self, and telos meaning goal. So an activity is autotelic if it's basically self-contained.
The doing itself is the reward.
The doing itself is the reward, completely independent of some future external benefit like money or praise or status.
But wait, that feels almost counterintuitive, doesn't it? Especially in our society, which drills into us the need to pursue external goals. How does this actually play out?
Well, the book gives this wonderful little anecdote about Signor Orsini, an old antique dealer in Naples.
Okay.
He wasn't poor, but definitely not rich. An American tourist comes into his shop and, basically breaking all the unwritten rules of haggling, offers this ridiculously high price for a couple of cherubs Orsini had spent ages restoring. A huge, unexpected windfall.
Oh, so great. He made the sale. Big profit.
Nope. Orsini refused the sale.
Refused it. Why?
He felt completely cheated. Not financially, but cheated out of the experience. He explained that if he were starving, sure, he'd take the money. But since he wasn't going to make a deal that isn't any fun.
Fun. What was the fun part?
For him, the enjoyment came from the clash of wits involved in bargaining. That whole dance where two people use strategy and cleverness and maybe a bit of bluffing to try and get the better deal.
Ah. So he chose the intrinsic reward. The enjoyment of the struggle, the game over the massive extrinsic profit.
Exactly. The loss of that engaging, enjoyable process was actually worse for him than the financial gain would have been good. That's the autotelic drive in its purest form, prioritizing the quality of experience over just accumulating stuff or money.
That really shifts the perspective, doesn't it? So for you listening, if we want to cultivate this optimal experience, this flow, we need to know what makes it happen. What are the conditions?
Right. And the amazing thing is, when you ask people who spend their lives deeply engaged in activities they love, think surgeons, rock climbers, artists, composers, the characteristics they report are incredibly consistent.
So there's a pattern.
A clear pattern. We can call these the core conditions of flow. They're like a checklist for structuring optimal experience.
Okay, let's list them out. What's number one?
First, a challenging activity that requires skills. Critically, the challenge has to constantly match or maybe slightly exceed your current skill level. That's the foundation. Not too easy, not too hard.
The sweet spot. Okay, what's next?
Second, clear goals and immediate feedback. You need to know exactly what you're trying to achieve moment by moment, and you need to know instantly how well you're doing in relation to that goal.
Like in a video game, you know your score, your health.
Perfect example. Third, intense concentration and involvement. The activity demands so much focus that there's literally no psychic energy, no attention left over to worry about irrelevant things. The mortgage, that awkward chat yesterday, none of it.
Your mind is completely on task. Condition 4.
4, self-consciousness disappears. You become so absorbed in the action that you forget about yourself, your problems, how you look, your social standing. The sense of self kind of merges with the activity.
You're not worrying about what others think. And the last one.
5th, your sense of time becomes distorted. Time might just fly by without you noticing hours have passed. Or sometimes it can feel like it slows right down, allowing you to perceive things in incredible detail.
Fascinating. And you mentioned these optimal experiences. They tend to happen with activities that have rules and goals.
Exactly. Goal-directed, rule-bound sequences of activity. That's why games and sports are such perfect laboratories for flow. They are literally designed to make optimal experience easier to achieve.
They give you the structure automatically.
They give you the clear goals, the rules, the immediate feedback. It's like a simulation for mastering life in a way.
Okay, let's dive a bit deeper into that first condition. Balancing challenge and skill. You said it's dynamic.
Absolutely critical. Flow requires this constant stretch. If the challenge is way too high for your current skills, what do you feel?
Anxiety, frustration, stress.
Right. And if the challenge is too low, if it's too easy?
Boredom, apathy, you check out.
Exactly. The enjoyment, the flow state, it lives right there on that knife edge between boredom and anxiety, right at the upper limit of your current capacity.
Which is why, as the sources mention, competition can be so engaging. Like Edmund Burke said, he who wrestles with us strengthens our nerves and sharpens our skill.
It forces you to raise your game, but there's a caveat, right?
Yeah, the competition has to remain a means to improve your skills. If it becomes only about beating the opponent, winning at all costs.
The enjoyment evaporates, it turns into stress, anxiety, maybe even aggression. The focus shifts from the process to the outcome.
And we can see this balancing act even in tiny private moments, right? This idea of microflow.
Yes. This is how people inject order and engagement into potentially boring or chaotic situations. The anecdote about Professor Heinz-Meyer-Leibniz, the physicist, is just brilliant here.
Right. The guy's stuck in boring academic conferences.
Yeah.
A common problem. Most people just daydream or doodle.
Yeah.
What did he do?
He refused to just succumb to psychic entropy, to boredom. He consciously decided to impose his own internal system of order onto that, dull flow of time.
Wow.
He invented this incredibly intricate, purely mental game, an 888 finger tapping sequence.
Finger tapping, how is that intricate?
Oh, the pattern was complex. He'd tap his thumb, then maybe the third finger, index, fourth, alternating hands, reversing the patterns. He introduced variations like full stops, half stops, changes in speed. It became almost musical in its complexity, all happening silently under the table.
Wow. So he turned boredom into this ongoing cognitive challenge.
Exactly, and this hits that concentration condition beautifully. It required just enough focus to keep his mind ordered and engaged, but not so much that he'd completely miss anything important being said in the lecture.
It kept him present, but occupied.
Perfectly occupied. It maintained just enough concentration so he wasn't bored, and apparently it was so well automated that if someone actually said something interesting, the thought would register immediately and the tapping would just pause automatically.
That's amazing. And he used it for timing, too.
Yeah, this is the ingenious part related to the time distortion element of flow. He figured out that the 888 taps, repeated 3 times, so 2,664 taps in total, took him almost exactly 12 minutes to perform once he got practiced.
So he had an internal stopwatch running.
Essentially, yes. If a thought about, say, a physics problem popped into his head during a dull bit, he'd note his exact place in the big 2,664 tap sequence, work through the physics problem mentally, then check his place in the tapping sequence again.
And he'd know precisely how long that thought process took.
Down to the quarter minute, apparently. He used his self-made flow activity to measure the duration of his own thoughts.
That is just the perfect illustration of achieving internal control, imposing order on potentially wasted time.
Oh.
Fantastic. Okay, let's shift gears slightly to physical skills. The Olympic motto, Altius, Citius, Fortius.
Higher, faster, stronger.
Right. It seems to capture the core reason we love sports, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Breaking limits.
Summarizes the whole rationale, yeah. pushing boundaries, surpassing the perceived limitations of the body. And the joy in that, it's inherently autotelic. It's not just for elite athletes either. That joy is potentially open to everyone.
Even in mundane activities.
Absolutely. Take something as simple as walking. For an experienced mountain hiker, it's not just putting one foot in front of the other. It's a deeply complex flow activity.
How so?
They're constantly setting micro goals the next foothold, navigating that tricky patch of scree. They're adjusting momentum, calculating their center of gravity almost subconsciously, reading the subtle friction on different surfaces, dirt, roots, wet rock.
And getting constant feedback.
Instant feedback from every muscle fiber, every shift in balance. It's intense, concentrated attention applied to something seemingly ordinary. And the result isn't just exercise. It's deep enjoyment.
That really speaks to that condition of immediate feedback, doesn't it? The environment, your own body, is constantly telling you how well you're meeting the challenge, allowing those tiny adjustments that keep you right in that flow channel, right on the edge of your skill.
Perfectly put. Now, we can apply the exact same principles to mental skills. If the body can be trained to find flow in movement, the mind can absolutely be trained to find it in thought.
How does that work?
Well, a mind that's, let's say, well stocked with rich patterns of information stories, poetry, mathematical concepts, historical narratives, scientific principles, that mind becomes inherently more autonomous, more self-contained.
Less dependent on external stimulation to keep it ordered, like needing the TV on constantly.
Exactly. A well-stocked mind provides its own continuous amusement and, crucially, its own internal structure, its own order. This makes it incredibly resilient, especially against external deprivation or chaos.
And there's a historical example of this.
A powerful one, the Icelanders. Think about their situation: historically isolated, long, dark, freezing winters, enduring incredible environmental deprivation for months on end.
Must have been psychologically brutal.
Could have been, but they had these vast internal symbolic systems, their epics, the famous Icelandic sagas, their complex poetry. They use these constantly.
Just reciting them.
Reciting, composing, analyzing. They use them actively to keep their consciousness ordered against the potential chaos and dread of the endless darkness and howling wind. They'd chant their poems, imposing linguistic form, rhythm, and meaning onto the external harshness.
So it wasn't just entertainment, it was a tool for mental survival.
It was absolutely psychological survival. They used these portable rules for the mind, memorized literature, poetic forms, intricate narratives to engage their concentration, find meaning, and generate flow from within.
So anyone who possesses that kind of internal toolkit, that organized symbolic system,
They have an enormous advantage, especially in conditions of physical or social deprivation where external input might be minimal or non-existent. They can generate the flow state internally, anytime, anywhere.
okay, this brings us to a really interesting, maybe even frustrating contradiction that seems to define a lot of modern life.
Yeah.
The conflict between work and free time.
Yes, the paradox of work and leisure.
It's strange, isn't it? People consistently report in studies some of their most positive experiences, feeling strong, creative, skillful, intensely concentrated while they're actually on the job.
Feeling effective.
Yet the very same people in the same studies also consistently say they wish they were working less. What's going on there?
The data is really robust on this. Csikszentmihalyi's studies using the experience sampling method found people report being in a state of flow a surprisingly high amount of the time. They're actually working something like 54% of the time.
54%. That's more than half the time at work is potentially optimal experience.
Potentially, yes. Now contrast that with typical unstructured leisure activities like watching television. Flow is reported much, much less frequently during TV time.
So why is work, which we often frame so negatively, actually such a potent, unexpected source of flow, and why that persistent desire to escape it?
Well, the desire to escape is often tied to the external constraints, right? The pay, the boss, the commute, the mandatory schedule, the lack of autonomy in how you work.
The stuff around the work itself.
Exactly. But the reason the work itself can be such a flow generator is because structurally, it's often like a well-designed game. It has many of those flow conditions built right in, like clear goals usually. You know what needs to be done. It often provides immediate feedback. You can see if the thing you're making is working or if the report is coming together. It has rules and procedures. And crucially, it presents challenges that require you to use and develop your skills.
So it's just easier to get involved, to get absorbed, because the structure is already there.
It facilitates involvement, yes. Leisure time, on the other hand, well, it's usually completely unstructured.
which means you have to provide the structure.
Exactly. It requires a much greater amount of internal conscious effort from the individual to shape that free time into something genuinely enjoyable and engaging.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Joe the welder. He seems like a perfect case study here.
Oh, Joe's story is fantastic. He worked in a noisy, harsh factory assembling railroad cars. By most external measures, a seemingly mindless, routine, maybe even unpleasant job.
And yet, he actively turned down promotions. He chose to stay as a welder. Why would he do that?
Because he had successfully, intentionally transformed his mindless job into an incredibly complex, intrinsically rewarding flow activity. He found his own niche, his own challenges.
What was it?
Broken machinery. He became fascinated by figuring out why machines broke down. He was constantly finding new mechanical problems to solve, often unrelated to his official welding duties, but within the context of his work environment.
He created his own challenges within the job.
He did, and he engaged in this fascinating process he called empathic identification. He'd ask himself this profound question: if I were that toaster or whatever machine was broken and I didn't work, what would be wrong with me?
Wow. He tried to see it from the machine's perspective.
He gave the machines a kind of temporary internal life to understand their malfunction. By doing this, he actively chose complexity over boredom. He manufactured his own challenges, constantly tuning the balance between his skills and the problems he chose to tackle.
So his work became autotelic for him. The enjoyment was in the problem-solving itself.
Precisely. He constructed the enjoyment himself, despite the external conditions. Now, let's flip that coin and look at the waste of free time.
Right. People long for the weekend, they dream of retirement, but then when they actually get that unstructured leisure,
They often report feeling bored and vaguely frustrated. It's a common finding.
and TV watching, which is still the single most popular leisure activity in many places.
It rarely leads to flow. In fact, the studies consistently show it tends to make people feel passive, weak, irritable, and even eventually a bit sad.
Why is that? It feels relaxing initially.
It's passive consumption. It absorbs your limited psychic energy, your attention, but it doesn't demand any skill, doesn't provide any challenge, doesn't lead to any growth.
So it drains you without giving anything back.
Pretty much. Free time, because it lacks that inherent structure, demands that you actively invest effort to shape it into something that provides real enjoyment and growth. Passive consumption doesn't cut it.
And things like mass leisure, watching millionaire athletes, listening to platinum records.
Often, they function as purely vicarious substitutes for active participation. You're watching someone else experience flow, someone else master a skill. It absorbs your psychic energy, but it doesn't build your strength or your skills.
So you end up feeling drained, but not from ever, just from psychic leakage.
That's a good way to think about it. Which brings us to the difficulty many people have with taming solitude.
Ah, yes. Being alone with your own thoughts. Especially those big blocks of unstructured time, like Sunday mornings for some people.
It's often dreaded, isn't it? Because without external demands, work tasks, social obligations to focus our attention, the mind tends to drift pretty quickly into psychic entropy.
Worries bubble up.
Worries about health, finances, relationships, that stupid thing you said yesterday, or just a general vague unease. The self is confronted with nothing but its own contents, and keeping order in the mind purely from within. That's maybe the ultimate challenge.
So the real test of having developed this autotelic self
Is what you choose to do, how you manage your consciousness when you're alone. And the source material offers these extraordinary, almost unbelievable examples of people achieving this internal control under the absolute harshest conditions imaginable.
like prisoners of war.
Exactly. Take Christopher Burney, held in solitary confinement during World War II, total isolation, sensory deprivation, constant threat. How do you possibly survive that psychologically?
We can't even imagine. What did he do?
He refused to let his mind dissolve into chaos. He turned his tiny, featureless cell into a manageable, long-term, absorbing challenge.
How? What challenge could there possibly be?
He decided to achieve absolute mental mastery over his physical environment. He meticulously measured everything: the length, breadth, height, orientation of the cell. He classified every tiny object, every scratch on the floor.
He made observation and measurement his work.
He did. He set in motion, in his words, a wonderful flow of combinations and associations in his mind, using these tiny physical details as starting points for complex internal narratives, calculations, and classifications. He imposed order.
An incredible act of mental discipline.
Yeah.
And the story of Tolos Tibor in the Hungarian prison.
Equally powerful, maybe even more so, because it involved collaboration under impossible circumstances. He and fellow intellectuals were imprisoned by the communist regime. No paper, no pencils, communication forbidden and dangerous.
So complete mental lockdown imposed from outside.
Right. Yet they occupied themselves, kept their minds sharp and engaged, for over a year by devising an incredibly ingenious secret poetry translation contest.
A contest? How?
They chose Walt Whitman's famous poem, O Captain, My Captain. Their challenge was to translate it into Hungarian. But how do you write your translation, keep it secret, and share it?
Seems impossible.
Tolos's method was astounding. He'd spread a thin film of soap on the sole of his shoe, and then, using a tiny sharpened toothpick, he would painstakingly carve the letters of his translation into the soap film.
Wow.
He'd memorize the lines, then erase them by smoothing the soap, ready for the next lines, all done in secret.
The sheer ingenuity, they transformed that horrific, chaotic, dangerous situation.
Into a manageable, shared, intellectually stimulating, and even enjoyable struggle, all through the power of self-imposed challenge and internal control. Solzhenitsyn, who experienced similar intellectual escape in the Gulag, wrote about feeling wafted overhead, feeling free and happy amidst the horror, just from the rush of rhymes and ideas.
That liberation didn't come from the external circumstances changing at all.
Not one bit. It came entirely from the individual's deliberate choice to impose their own order, their own goals, their own challenges on their inner experience.
These examples, they lead us directly to this idea of resilience, don't they? The ability to not just endure hardship, but to somehow transform it.
Exactly. To find a new direction, a new way to invest that psychic energy when adversity inevitably strikes. To actively turn misfortune into a source of strength, or at least a new source of engaging challenge. And doing that, it requires the highest degree of control over your own consciousness.
It sounds like you need the psychological equivalent of an energy converter.
Right.
The ability to literally make order out of chaos.
Or to extract psychic energy from entropy, like plants using sunlight, which is a form of dissipated energy, to create complex biological structures.
That's a great analogy. And the research on people who have faced truly incredible adversity concentration camp survivors, people with severe disabilities, it found something quite unexpected, didn't it?
Deeply unexpected and powerful. Many, not all, of course, but many individuals in these studies actually came to view their tragedy in retrospect as a profoundly positive event in their lives.
Positive? How could that be?
Because the tragedy, paradoxically, radically simplified their lives. It stripped away trivial concerns, eliminated a confusing array of choices, and often provided a new set of absolutely clear, all-consuming goals and challenges.
So the uncertainty of modern life, that paradox of choice, can itself be a source of chaos and entropy. And the tragedy, counterintuitively, provided focus, structure.
Precisely. Look at the story of Lucio, who was paralyzed from the waist down in a motorcycle accident. Before, he was described as a kind of happy-go-lucky gas station attendant, maybe living a somewhat aimless life.
And after the accident, which most would see as purely devastating.
He didn't just dwell on what he'd lost. He focused intensely on what was still possible within his new reality. He rebuilt his life around new challenges.
What did he do?
He enrolled in college, became a freelance tax consultant, and he found deep, engaging flow in activities he could pursue from his wheelchair, things like fishing, and especially archery.
Archery.
He became so involved, so skilled, that he eventually became a regional archery champion. He found greater purpose, complexity, and arguably deeper enjoyment in his modified life than he had before.
That's incredible. People like Lucio, they perfectly demonstrate this autotelic self in action, don't they?
The ability to readily, almost naturally transform a potential threat or limitation into an enjoyable, engaging challenge. They rebuilt their entire system of goals, skills, and rewards around the new constraints.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize all this. If someone listening wants to consciously build this more resilient, more internally controlled autotelic self, what's the blueprint? What are the core steps?
The blueprint is really a direct application of the flow model, but applied to life itself, not just specific activities. It boils down to about 4 key practices.
Okay, number 1.
First, setting clear goals. This means consciously defining goals that are challenging enough to engage you, but realistic enough to be achievable. And this applies at all levels, from minor daily choices like Mayor Leibniz's tapping.
To major lifelong commitments.
Exactly. The key is to avoid getting stuck in trivial goals that lead to stagnation, but also avoid the collapse that comes from wildly unrealistic expectations.
Got it. Second,
Second, becoming immersed in the activity. This is about cultivating the ability to focus your attention completely on the task at hand, actively managing that balance between the demands of the situation and your current skills, and crucially, learning to find the enjoyment in the effort itself, not just the outcome.
paying attention to the process. Third,
Third, paying attention to what happens. This means being fully open and receptive to the environment, to the feedback you're getting from the activity in real time. The source uses the example of Charles Lindbergh during his solo flight across the Atlantic.
what did he do?
He didn't waste his precious psychic energy on fear or doubt about whether he'd make it. Instead, he became minutely, intensely conscious of everything relevant to the flight, every instrument reading, the sound of the engine, even the specific weld marks on the struts of the plane.
He merged his attention with the reality of the flight.
Completely absorbed. He was taking in every relevant detail, processing it, responding to it. That's paying attention.
And the fourth point,
Fourth, learning to enjoy immediate experience. This is perhaps the most fundamental shift in perspective. It's the deep realization that the primary rewards of life aren't waiting at the finish line. They're found in the process itself, in the sustained concentration, the deployment of skills, the feeling of engagement.
enjoying the journey,
Yeah.
quite literally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Finding the autotelic quality in the doing.
So once a person gets better at generating flow in specific things, work, hobbies, even mundane tasks, what's the next level?
The final and arguably most complex level of development is integrating all these actions, all these pockets of flow, into a unified, coherent whole, into what Csikszentmihalyi calls a life theme.
A life theme, like an overarching purpose.
Exactly. This is where we get into the pursuit of meaning. Meaning, psychologically speaking, isn't some vague, mystical concept. It's defined quite clearly as having a goal or a set of related goals that is challenging enough and significant enough to order a whole lifetime's worth of your psychic energy.
And that provides purpose, direction, resolution.
Purpose, direction, and a sense of resolution, yes, it gives coherence to your efforts. But the key here is that we need to move beyond just accepting the prepackaged life scripts that our culture or the consumer market hands us.
We need to find our own.
We need to find what the author calls discovered life themes, themes that emerge from our own experiences, our own values, our own unique engagement with the world.
Malcolm X is given as an example here, right?
A powerful example. He used the structure and enforced solitude of his time in jail, not as a period of psychic entropy and despair, but as an incredible opportunity for sustained concentration, reading, and reflection.
He built a new self.
He constructed an entirely new intellectual identity, a powerful purpose. He transformed his personal struggle against injustice into this unifying, coherent life theme that ordered and energized all his subsequent actions. That's a discovered life theme.
And developing this kind of theme, it happens in stages.
It seems to. The model suggests stages of increasing complexity in how we structure our goals and find meaning. Initially, the focus is often purely on self-interest, pursuing immediate pleasure, biological gratification, basic security.
Stage 1, what's next?
As the self matures, the focus tends to expand outward to group values, seeking belonging, acceptance, validation from family, community, nation, ideology, conforming to external expectation.
Finding identity through the group.
Then, often, there's a turn back inward towards self-actualization. This is where the focus shifts to personal growth, exploring potential, seeking enjoyment through experimentation, creativity, pushing personal limits, often through autotelic activities discovered for their own sake.
Mastering skills, finding flow. And the final stage.
The final, most complex stage described is forging unity with universal values. This is where the individual recognizes that their personal purpose, their life theme, needs to connect with and contribute to something larger than themselves.
Merging with a bigger system.
Becoming an active contributing link in a larger flow, whether that's advancing human knowledge through science, pursuing spiritual understanding, dedicating oneself to social justice, or contributing to the arts. The effort is applied not just for personal mastery, but for a purpose that transcends the individual ego.
Merging your individual flow with the universal flow.
That's the ultimate integration, the highest level of complexity described.
Wow, okay, so bringing this all together.
The synthesis of all this research, really, it points to a powerful, maybe even counterintuitive, liberating truth. True freedom, true liberation, it doesn't come from minimizing effort or escaping responsibility or just maximizing passive pleasure.
Where does it come from then?
It comes from the self-imposed order we learn to create within our own consciousness. We have to consciously choose to be the active agents of our own attention.
Not just letting it be pulled around by external stimuli or internal anxieties.
Exactly. Choosing activities, choosing ways of focusing that promote complexity, growth, skill development, and genuine enjoyment, not just momentary, passive pleasure.
And that requires facing challenges, both internal and external. Which brings us to a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. The source material uses Dante's Inferno as this powerful metaphor for finding meaning later in life.
The journey out of the dark forest.
Right. Dante finds himself lost in this dark wood, maybe a midlife crisis, a loss of direction. And the way out, significantly, leads through hell. But he can only start that journey after recognizing and confronting the dangers that block his path.
The three fierce beasts.
The lion, the lynx, and the she-wolf, often interpreted as symbols of ambition, lust, and greed, or maybe pride, envy, avarice, depending on the reading. Basically, powerful external distractions or internal drives pulling him off course.
Okay.
So the question for you is, what specific fierce beast, what powerful external distraction, what consuming internal rumination is currently blocking your path? What's consuming your limited psychic energy and preventing you from fully entering the flow of your own life?
Is it maybe the endless chase for status? Or the constant pursuit of passive, easy pleasure? Or perhaps that nagging anxiety about what other people think? It's worth reflecting on.
Definitely. And our challenge to you, based on everything we've discussed, is to start small. Start today.
Don't try to overhaul your whole life overnight.
No. Just take one ordinary, maybe even boring, mundane activity that you have to do anyway. Washing the dishes, driving the same commute, filing some paperwork, anything.
And what should they do with it?
Actively, consciously, impose a new specific set of rules or challenges on it. Time yourself. Look for ways to do it more efficiently or more elegantly. Focus your attention completely, just for those few minutes. Be like the finger-tapping professor or the conscious hiker, noticing every detail.
Turn that ordinary moment into a small, deliberate, autotelic experience.
Exactly. See if you can find the flow in it, even for just a moment.
Yeah.
And just notice what happens to your sense of engagement, your enjoyment, your feeling of control. When you do, it might surprise you.